Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, February 6, 2024. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 12 p.m. Superintendent, is there anything you wish to adjust or comment on the agenda?
No adjustments or comments at this time, sir.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 items on the agenda: Board Auditor, number 2, Hurricane Ian financial update, and number 3, the agenda review of February 6, 2024 regular agenda. As a reminder, everyone, per board protocol, you should strive 4 minutes for initial comments, 2 minutes for your follow-up comments, for a total of 10 minutes. So right now we're going to get into item number 1 with Dr. Savage, and that will be Board Auditor. Welcome, Dr. Savage.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman Fisher, Vice Chairman Langford Fleming, esteemed board members, Attorney Dupuy Bruno, and Superintendent Bernier. I'm here today to re-engage this conversation, particularly as we move into the budget season, looking for July positions and those types of things. But we're really here just to continue the conversation with the board about the board internal auditor position. This is based on the prior board discussions where the board indicated an interest in considering the hiring of an internal auditor. So what you have as an attachment for the meeting agenda item is the draft job description. This was done because there was some prior conversation about the adopted board auditor position the district had to make some revisions. And so essentially what occurred was we took the board auditor positions for the various different districts that have them and incorporated all the different elements to try to enhance our current job description as a draft product that has been brought back to you today to receive additional feedback. Additionally to that, as you'll notice, we also updated the organizational chart based on the board's feedback of wanting a pre and post election. So what would it look like if they were to hire a board auditor prior to the November time period, as well as what would it look like then after that time period. And so those 2 org charts are also attached to this item for your discussion. Also, we just wanted to provide some additional updates. One unique update from our current legislative session was part of one of the 3 Senate deregulation bills that were proposed. 7002 included a component that speaks to this particular area. Now again, there's a long way from Senate bills to signed into law. There's a whole separate side. There's the House and the deregulation bill there, but it was worth mentioning that on its initial pass, the Senate bill passed 39-0, and one big change that impacted this particular area was the entire removal of Florida Statute 1001.42, Section 12, subsection 1, which specifically took out all of the board internal auditor language. That includes the shall and the or the could aspect of it. However, it was worth mentioning that the House deregulation bill did not have any of this particular language. So it's just something that we continue to watch and we get updates accordingly on that. The other piece that was mentioned at the last board meeting was what type of fiscal impact would this have, and that really will depend on the level that the board would want if they were to pursue this. What level of pay would they want commensurate with other types of positions here in the district? We've also included some backup material for the board members to review that goes into more of the detail of the different districts that we looked at, all the different configurations of other org charts, as well as their job descriptions, so that you could have that ability to see how those different configurations go, because there are really no 2 districts that handle this exactly the same. There are some similar patterns in different districts, but because of that diversity and how districts approach meeting this requirement, that was also backup material for you to be able to review as you considered this discussion today. Last but not least, it was directed me that there were some additional comments that had been made just that I want to make sure I provided answers to. So this feedback came to the board and the superintendent, our board attorney, from our clerk of courts, the Honorable Kevin Carnes, had some wonderful feedback that was shared with me, so I want to make sure you had answers to those questions. The first question that was made was around the minimum qualifications, kind of assessing that. in line with industry standards for an audit executive. But the concern that was shared, which was his personal concern, was that the job title itself does not necessarily sound like an executive level position, which could present challenges. So I wanted to respond to that through the research that's also in part of your backup material there, you would find that boards probably contemplated that very piece of feedback. And so one element that you would find is that certain boards, for example, like Palm Beach, their board auditor is actually an inspector general. So that elevates and kind of breasts that, whereas in Miami-Dade, by contrast, that board auditor position is not called board auditor, it's called a chief auditor. And again, so you see that chief as a nod to that idea of a chief level type of position. So I wanted to give you that because you can see all the different bigger districts and how they handle it, but that's an example of potentially that type of consideration. If the board wanted to have something like that added to ours, certainly we would need that type of feedback from you as a board, as well as we could always add something to the job description that we don't presently have, a comment such as we could add senior management experience preferred, something to that effect. That's what some job descriptions do, because in Florida, the senior management class, that elevates this idea that it is a senior management type of audit position, whereas by contrast, a lot of our positions require masters, doctorates, and so forth. In the auditing world, it isn't necessarily beyond that bachelor's. That was a piece of board comment I forgot to mention, was there was some concern that level of education wasn't high enough, but we actually took the job descriptions from all much bigger systems that have this role, and that was the level that they had as well, bachelor's. So it is pretty consistent, but the certifications that you see do demonstrate, a level of robust qualifications that you would want to see. The second item, the only other piece of feedback was given, was related to conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of all areas every 5 years per Florida statutes. And the recommendation there was basically that the Red Book standards require a documented risk assessment at least annually. So how to explain that discrepancy. So what I can assure you on that is that the every 5 years, that's taken directly from Florida statute, and that's specifically Florida statute 1001.42, section 12, subsection L1. And what that basically outlines is that every 5 years, there has to be that comprehensive, it's part of that same statute that is in play here. However, to clarify, I think the difference is the word comprehensive for the entire organization. The reality is, in the development of an annual audit plan, there is typically, if they take a risk approach, they're utilizing risk. They are conducting more periodic needs assessments, or even throughout a year. There's different aspects. So it's still based on needs. It's just not necessarily the comprehensive risk assessment that is required by statute. And I think that's probably why it was listed in those other job descriptions, so that there's an awareness that this is a statutory requirement, that this position is also responsible to ensure we are doing. But again, those were the two substantive questions that I had in advance of this, and just wanted to make sure I provided you some answers to that. And I'm here to take notes and to follow up with additional work based on the direction of the board and your discussion today. Before I do that, if I could turn it back to the superintendent, if there's anything he would like to add to what I've said before more discussion.
No, Dr. Savage. Just generally, though, this is our opportunity to come back again. We've gone away, we've done some work, we've pulled some details together. We've continued to update organizational charts, job descriptions, trying to get closer to what you might want to consider if you move in this direction. I think really importantly, it would be an avenue for additional information for you as a board to have an auditor, and that's what's been expressed in the past, to help keep track of audits, audit findings, making sure that you have one singular source point. I also believe that there should be some consideration in your discussion today regarding the role of RSM, and whether this replaces RSM's work, or whether RSM will be seen as an add-on or a additional tool for this individual if you move in the auditing direction to be there. There's also some additional conversation that we'll need to have based upon your discussions today internally, based upon an Auditor General's finding, where they wanted our internal audit department to report to someone separate, and their recommendation was to an internal auditor. It would be unusual to have employees report to a contracted vendor like RSM. So depending, if we start to move down this path, it will give me some clarification to speak with Dr. Desamore and the individuals involved in the auditing department as to what other parts of the organizational chart might have to change. We still have time, but we're also thinking about this, the timing of this with budget season and the work underway with the cabinet level. We want to make sure that if this is going to happen, we want to plan for it moving forward in the budget for 24-25, school year 24-25. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you also, Dr. Savage.
Thank you, Dr. Savage, and thank you, Dr. Bernier. Board members, comments, questions? Ms. Morgan.
So I thought you made a very good point that basically we have to decide whether we want what is called an internal auditor, and let me get to that in a minute, or we just want somebody who is managing the audit function in the district, because an internal auditor really is responsible for operational audits, compliance audits, risk audits, IT audits, financial audits. I mean, that's their job. And that is how it is described in the world of business. Now, back in 2000, I think it was 17, we did hire an operational auditor from outside who came in and for $70,000 found $1 million in savings in one area, and offered to come back and do deep dives in five different areas that they identified for greater opportunities to recover some income. And because of the cost at that time, the board at that time chose not to move ahead. What we have not done in this district is operational audits. Now, effectively what's happened in IT with the work on PeopleSoft and some of these other systems is really, an audit of the function and a rethinking of the function and restructuring of the function to make it more operational, more responsive, more transparent. But we haven't done that in other operating departments. So I think the question before the board really is, are you going to hire someone who's sort of a generalist, which is how I'm reading this description, or are you looking for somebody who's going to come in and really push the various departments to do some of the auditing we need to do? So for example, now let me just talk about the job description. I'm trying to go through this as quickly as I can. I took the job description and thinking it was going to be something higher level, rewrote, or what is it called, the job function, where is that? Where's the
Major function.
yeah, where's the document? Well, oh yeah, there we go, major functions. So I rewrote it to say, provides the school board assurance services, which are operational, financial, compliance, risk, and IT audits, promotes efficient, effective, and transparent operations, ensures integrity and accountability of district functions and programs. That's one comment. So to take it from sort of this, what I thought was a pretty, I don't know, generic, sort of suggestive description and tried to make it more meaty. And then I would take the essential job functions, of which there are 25. And these can really be compressed into different areas of responsibility and obligations, et cetera. So from my point of view, I think this needs some work. But, that's my reaction.
Is anything else, Ms. Morgan?
Oh, no, that's it. Thank you.
Just wanted to double check that.
Yep.
Mr. Person?
Well, basically, it looks like if we were to hire this for next year, we've already hired RSM, who's doing a lot of the same. So that first year could be, like I said, we're going to have to definitely have a talk about that. It's no use having people do the same thing.
Right.
Toward the future, I could see either going one or two directions, either keeping RSM to do the deep dives, and they do a good job of doing deep dives, or, you know, having this one, elevating this one to do that. I just want to make a point that, you know, we do have operations being looked at right now through RSM. But I agree with you, there could always be more. So I don't know where we go from there, to be honest with you, especially the main reason we're looking at this was because of the law that they said we weren't having the person report the right way, and if that gets repealed, then it's really up to us whether we want it or don't want it. But I think we need to move forward. I'm just not sure whether we want to go to the major function or just to keep it as an overseer. So, and I'm open a little bit to either one, that's all.
Comments, questions? You know, okay, go ahead, Ms. Jordan.
I know we spoke about this some years ago as well, and I spoke with the person who was the Inspector General at Palm Beach, and they were very willing to have that conversation because of the fact that when you're speaking with them, they spoke about how they were an independent person. They didn't care what anybody else thought. The board, yes, I work for the board, but I am independent on making sure that everything is where it needs to be, and as an overseer actually, and making sure that they were doing their job regardless of who liked them or who did not like them, which I really appreciated the fact that that they were independent and nobody was going to make them change their minds on what was taking place, and they were there for to do a job. And so I really like that. And then they were actually used a similar RSM to do certain projects for them. But I know that many of these we did speak to, and they had teams. So you had the Inspector General, and then they had 5 or 6 other members under them who actually worked as the auditors for the whole district. So there's a lot of different ways, but I know they were very willing to speak to any of us if they wanted more information or conversation.
Mr. Persons?
I mean, I agree with Debbie. It's a one-person, this is not a one-person department.
Right.
I mean, so it would have to be a whole team if it gets elevated. And, or that person could be over RSM and then use RSM to be their people. So that seems to me the direction you got to, one way or the other. I think the first year, if we decide to go ahead, it would have to be them above the RSM. And we're pretty much working with them, but RSM reporting to them. But they've already have their scope of work that they're working on, so there's not a whole lot but oversee it. But the first year, for a board auditor to get to know the district, that might be the best way to go, because RSM is familiar with the district right now. And then we would have to decide the following year whether to keep RSM with the auditor or let the auditor do his own department. But I don't see all that being decided this year, in my opinion. I think we just need to decide whether we want to go with this auditor and have him work with RSM. And then when it comes time next year to renew the contracts, then we have to decide whether we keep RSM or expand the department. And at least that seems how my mind's thinking of it right now. I don't know. I see Dr. Venero over there with a puzzled look on his
No,
face.
it's not a puzzled look. We've had those two conversations. You're right. It can be, and I remember this clearly. We could have an internal auditor or we could have RSM, but there was also the potential in what Dr. Savage and I presented was sort of a hybrid model. Rather than building, and we included a number of different organizational charts from districts across the state of Florida to give you an idea. Some have built out an entire team underneath them. Some have 3 to 4 members that report directly to the Inspector General or the Auditor General or the Chief Auditor. And then I know they supplement that activity with a contracted service that the auditor, the chief auditor, would work through the audit committee and with the board to make the determinations as to what they do. So when we were listening the last time, we were, what Dr. Savage and I heard was sort of a blended model between an auditor general and RSM being an avenue, or another organization being the avenue by which they could conduct audits. The critical component that we thought we heard was the centralization of the auditing information coming back to this one individual who would then be responsible for ensuring policies change, procedures change, follow-ups are done, and rather than having to make the determination of who handled the operational audit, who handled the financial audit, who handled the IT audit, and going to individual chiefs, we would have an individual centrally for the board, working for the board, who would ensure audit compliance, as well as taking deeper dives into particular or special or important projects. So.
Ms. Juvenelli.
Thank you. Couple things. Since I think we value the importance of an auditor because of the fact that we're going to the elected superintendent. And I think that the board, one of the board's key roles will be essential after the elected superintendent with the board oversight. So, you know, we kind of have something similar with our legal department that has grown. And I think that RSM could be a contracted consultant like we have several other law firms. But I think we need an in-house auditor, and I think that we really need to stay very vigilant on our operations and how things are functioning, because that's going to be the primary role of this board, I believe, with the elected superintendent in place. I think it's important. We all received an email from Kevin Carnes, and the clerk of court, and I just want to read that into the record because I think it's important what how he valued the qualifications and the job description. And so he wrote, the position's minimum qualifications are in line with the industry standard for our audit executive. However, in my personal opinion, the job title does not sound like an executive level position, which may present challenges with applicants. So I think we need to really value that opinion. He also said, listed under essential job descriptions, there is a sentence that states, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of all areas every 5 years per Florida statute. However, the Red Book standards require a documented risk assessment be undertaken at least annually. So I think this is important to take his opinion and, into consideration. And so I wanted to bring that up. I believe we all received that. I don't know for sure, but,
Ms. Giovanelli?
Yeah, we discussed this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Dr. Savage had brought it up.
I'm sorry. My apologies. But it's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Juvenelli. May I give my comments? Is everyone all right with that? So thank you. No, and thank you to everyone for the board discussion. No, I regardless of the law or not, whatever happens, I think it's incumbent upon us as a district, especially of this size and going to elect a superintendent, we do have an auditor, internal auditor, and RSM may be a third party, but they're still performing our internal functions as well. I just want to make sure we're not getting that confused right now. So I would agree with others up here. I think I think we do need to tighten some stuff up, but I am not in the mind of waiting on this. So I think we need to move this full steam ahead. And I would look at it just kind of like Ms. Juvenelli and others we've talked about, is we have that internal position, and I think Dr. Brenner referenced it. We have other current employees with that could always, they could, depending on what happens, move them underneath that auditor and keep RSM. RSM is another extension, just as you had mentioned, Ms. Juvenelli. I think that's important. So that can handle especially some of those maybe more specialized tasks. But I think especially based on our size and what we've going on, I think it's incumbent upon us. I agree with the title too. I would be, I would be more in favor of, and Dr. Savage, but I'm looking at the backup materials, sorry. Perhaps calling it chief auditor, something like that, or chief board auditor. I don't know what people feel about that, but something to that a position if we do. So I agree with that, and I agree with the take from Clerk Carnes in regards to that. So, but I don't know, I'd be all for moving ahead with this. Dr. Savage, can you remind me, you had mentioned also beefing up a little bit of the suggested qualifications. It was about experience. Can you repeat that line if you recall?
Yes, so just, this was in response to, valuing our clerk of court's opinion on this, and basically, there's the title that's being referenced to make it more executive level sounding, so that was the feedback that led to something like a chief auditor, chief board auditor type of idea, and it really, there's a variety, so some of those are actually in your board backup materials, you can see some of the different options. But additionally to that, there was consideration of adding a line such as, and this just to go directly to where you would see it so that it's visible for the board members. This is where one of the other jobs that we looked at specifically called out, so where you would put minimum qualifications and it says supervisory experience required, there could be instead a semicolon and then add something to the effect of senior management experience preferred, or there could be a number of the senior management in Florida that for a term of art that elevates to us that is an executive level of experience that is desired, or we could add additional pieces. But since these were derived not from our own ideas but really from the research of what other districts currently have published, we wanted to make sure it was a little bit more inclusive of some of these things so you could see how other districts have done it as well as provide that as backup. So that's just one example of a way to elevate that so that there's an awareness that this isn't just purely managerial and supervisory, but in fact senior management, which does that is the term of art that highlights executive level experience in Florida based on our retirement system language.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. Board, would you be in favor of amending the language to, the senior management experience? Does anyone have any objection to that, at least to go in the draft on that? Okay. And the 1 second, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you.
Let me finish for one
Oh,
moment,
okay, I'm
please.
sorry.
Thank you. So I also want to address, if we can talk about the title when we go down here, but I'll go back to then Ms. Jordan before we get to that. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, have we, I guess Mr. Persons would be that person on the audit committee. Have we brought this to the audit committee? And I know many of the people who sit on that audit committee use the Red Book. So they speak on that and they have that information of what is required for such a position. I know that Mr. Carnes has sent us something regarding this, but we have a committee that answers to the board, and have we asked them their opinion and their verbiage on what this might look like, because the fact that they are professionals in this field of auditing. I'm just curious if that has taken place.
Well, we have multiple professionals, but I agree with that. Mr. Persons, let him answer that question.
I mean, they are aware that we're looking into this. We've brought it up. They have not made a specific recommendation, but there is a meeting tomorrow at 4:30, the audit committee. And I'll definitely bring it.
Yeah, we've not received any direction from the board to take it to the audit committee. So, and we tend not to share things with committees until we've shared them with the board. So if you would like us to bring this information forward to the audit committee, let them take a look at the job description, the organizational structure, provide them any of the backup materials that we're providing to you, more than happy to do so.
Finished.
I personally would like to see that happen, only because the fact that when we brought, RSM came back to us, that was part of the, if you will, the deal with them, was the fact that they went through the audit committee, and then that would be brought to us through the audit committee. So I just feel that we have committees, we ask people to sit on these committees, we ask for their, and there are specific people that we ask to sit on certain committees. And if we are asking our community and the public to participate, I think that we should absolutely hear what they have to say. That's my personal opinion.
I personally have no objection to that. I don't know if the rest of the board feels like if they want to go to the audit committee. Do we have any objection to that? What are we going to bring to them, though? That's the question. What do we want them to look at? Go.
I would want them, just as we just said, the verbiage of the job description, the title of the job, what we just asked Dr. Savage to look into or to possibly change, or what you just asked for, those same things. You know, how do they feel? It should be Inspector General, should be Chief, what verbiage would attract the people to come in? What does that look like? And what management skills or supervisor skills? How do we tighten this up? And even Ms. Morgan had mentioned quite a few things. So bringing all of that to them, you know, to give them an opportunity to help us.
Ms. Patrica, then Mr. Persons.
Attorney Dupree Bruno is trying to, but I also need something when you're done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry about that.
Just to Ms. Jordan's point, your board policy with regard to the audit committee, that is one of their purposes, is to make recommendations to the board in the selection of the board internal auditor. So it would be appropriate for them to review this as well.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So in terms of what to bring to the audit committee, I would suggest Dr. Savage and the presentation that he gave to the board today, and just add 30, 60 seconds at the end as to what the board feedback was. That's what I would recommend.
Mr. Chair, I think it's really important before we take things and decide what we're going to take to the audit committee that we make some decisions about what we have in front of us and make sure that we've captured all the changes, like to Ms. Giovanelli's point and Ms. Dr. Savage's point about Kevin Karn's material. We've heard that. We've heard about a title change from several of you about increasing the level so that people would understand that this individual has some authority within the organization, et cetera, et cetera. Where we were with getting some really good feedback on all of those would give Dr. Savage and myself the time to then revise it based upon board's input, bring those revised materials to the audit committee, then the audit committee could add their material to it, and then it could come back to the board in terms of a process. I want to make also clear that the superintendent is well aware of what board policy is on this. I'm simply saying to all of you, we've had an established protocol that we come to you first. We will always take it wherever you direct the superintendent to take this information to. So we will take it to the audit committee willingly. I don't know that we can take it at 4:30 tomorrow. That's what I'm trying to say. We would want time to settle on titles, to get Ms. Morgan's language, to incorporate that language. I've also heard some information about wanting to shrink, not necessarily shrink the responsibilities, but shrink the number of responsibilities, but bolster them into tighter, better paragraphs, better bullet points.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. So we've already talked about looking into a draft in regards to the experience. We talked about Dr. Savage, so that was one. We talked about title. My suggestion would either be chief auditor or chief board auditor. Does anyone else have suggestions or way they'd like to go with that? Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, I've got to push back a little bit. Dr. Bernier, that audit committee is populated with experts in this area.
They're phenomenal.
And as I look across the table, I don't necessarily see experts in this area. So I would feel more comfortable bringing what staff has brought to us to them so they can provide us with feedback before we make any changes. That's kind of, and if that can't be done by 4:30 tomorrow, then we can do it at the next meeting. But that's kind of, I don't want to make changes and then bring it to the audit committee and they change it back, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. I want their expert eyes on this so that we do it right every step of the way. Make sense?
Does to me, yes, ma'am.
Let me go to Mr. Persons and then Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, what I was going to recommend to them, and I know most of them watch our meetings, so they're aware of what's going on right now. And I don't have a problem giving them the draft and telling them, please, if you have not watched it, see what we're discussing. And be ready to make some feedback to the board at the next meeting or whatever, or even hold another meeting before then. I mean, they're pretty open, they're a good group. They keep their meetings to 1 hour, which is very unusual. They're very prompt. And I think they should be kept in the loop now as much as possible, but not expect them to make recommendations by tomorrow night. I mean, so this is just to inform them that what direction we're working on, because I make a board report, and that's what I was going to tell them. And ask them to look and make some recommendations. And then I'd like to see their recommendations too before we do our final ones.
Yeah.
So I think we're in that good direction there. I don't know when we're going to discuss this again. That's the next one for y'all to make. But I think we should make a couple of adjustments on the draft. It'll still be a draft when it comes before us next time. So I think we can make those, changing the name. I don't think that's a major issue for the audit committee. It just has to elevate it. They may have some additional qualifications, and they would make those, and we could change those at the next draft when we go over it. But I would go ahead and just give them, just print this out for them, basically. I don't know if we need to do a whole presentation at this time. That's all.
Okay, next is Ms. Morgan. I also want to be aware we're getting close on time.
So my concern in taking it to the audit committee now is that it's a very rough draft, and I really hate taking something that is not well thought out in terms of well articulated to a group of professionals and then ask them to wordsmith it. Also, the question was asked, what direction are we going? We haven't decided what direction we're going. And then, a name change signals what direction we're going, so it automatically sets something up. I really do think we need to have a little bit more clarity, unless we're going to them with the question of, and a very simple question and having nothing to do with the job description, is the question of them, we go for a senior level auditor, or we go for a management or administrative level auditor. That's one question we can ask, and they can have that discussion and come back to us. But I don't think we have something to give to them that, other than just throwing the thing to them, and then, I don't know. That's my comment. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Well, I actually agreed with Ms. Patrica. My concern is we keep kicking the can down the road. And I know how we can do that. And I feel like staff has done a lot of work here. That could be a presentation for tomorrow at 4:30 without even, as Mr. Person said, they can watch our meeting. But I think everything that's been brought up is already key. Some of these, the title and job description, those are little minority things for me. I don't think they're that. I think we can fix that. Can be fixed in with a couple different ideas and thoughts, but I don't and opinions. But I think that we have to keep moving it forward. We know we need it. So now, what is the level of expectation that of the need that we're expecting to have? So. My opinion would be like Ms. Patrica, and just see what they say tomorrow and give them something they could have it tonight and look at it and read it and give Mr. Persons their opinion tomorrow at the meeting at 4:30. And they would have almost 24 hours if they get it right now. So, my thought. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan had addressed this a little bit, and that was going to be my next question. So again, my understanding out of all of this was we would have our own internal auditor, and then they would utilize RSM, or we even talked about fraud, waste, and abuse with the clerk's office, those kind of things. As I said, you kind of have the quarterback, and then the other ones are kind of your specialties. Are we okay as a board moving forward in that direction at this moment, or before we do anything else? Is there objection to that? Okay, and this is not not a finished product, and, you know, we're still going to come back on drafting this. So, I mean, I have no problem going to the audit committee with this. I just want to make sure that we do have some direction in regards to where we're going forward with this. We talked about, I mean, at least we can offer, you know, 2 different suggestions for the names, at least, to see where we're at with that. So I don't want to also overload staff either with this request for tomorrow, too. I don't want to leave it. I'm also going to come back. I see Board Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think to Ms. Morgan's point, the job description and the title is very important and indicative into which direction the board chooses to move forward. If you use the word title chief, for example, who is that person going to report to? Is that a chief under the superintendent, or is it still the board that wants that person to report directly to them? So I think caution should be, is advised when determining specifically the job description and the title, because that will direct which direction you're going towards.
Thank you, and that's why I indicated Chief Board Auditor, for that understanding that they would be sitting beneath the board, so. Okay, so we're moving forward with this part. Real quick, I don't know if Dr. Bernier was about to.
I do have some questions.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
I think we could have this presentation. I will check with Dr. Savage's schedule to make sure Dr. Savage could be available. I think it's great for Mr. Persons to be there, but it'd be great if staff could be present, do the presentation, take the notes, make sure that we have that and be able to draw back. But I do think it's important for this board to have a discussion of what you want this person to be, because it helps then devise a title and make some determinations. And I would share with you that the Auditor General's opinion is really vital in this, because to create a position as the board member, as the board attorney just suggested, and where it reports to, like reports to the superintendent, it's very, very clear in the Auditor General's opinion that we can't do that.
Correct.
This needs to be a person who reports to the board. It also gives you a decided advantage with this internal person to do what I would call quick audits. That at the course of a conversation, if we wanted to look at a Riverdale, for instance, which we had a contract out with RSM, it's very possible that this could have been done through the internal auditor. There's been some other purchases that have recently been made regarding a fuel tanker that I think at least one particular board member would like more information about. It'd be really great to hand that off to an auditor who could then assign staff to do that work, and rather than the chief of staff and the operations chief doing that work while they're still trying to run their particular pieces of the division. So I do think that's the only thing I would want. I think I'm getting a sense of that you'd want this person to report directly to you. The title has to be respective of being a chief, you know, that somebody is, you know, has authority to speak across to other chiefs, other members of cabinet. And I think the most important thing is, though, we have to maybe make the determination, and I would still move forward with a hybrid model. You can always pull it back. But my recommendation for Dr. Savage would be to talk about a hybrid model with RSM being utilized as day-to-day and resources until the board makes an overall decision of whether it wants to grow its own internal department or whether it wants to continue, because we are already contracted with RSM moving into the following, I believe, the following year. So, and they do a good job for you. And then this person could ensure the compliance with those audits and all the follow-ups. So I think we have enough information and be able to answer some questions that will come from that esteemed group. It's not that I wanted the board to wordsmith all this out. It's that I need more direction so that when these really intelligent, amazing men and women who sit on the audit committee start asking our questions, that we, Dr. Savage and I, feel comfortable enough in speaking on behalf of the board. That's a difficult position to be in if we don't feel like we have enough information, and then we present and we don't have enough feedback to them, so we can't move the conversation further until we come back here. So it's a chicken and an egg. Yeah.
No, thank you, Dr. Bernier. I will triple clarify on this then, that we're interested in moving forward with a hybrid model at the moment, get some feedback, obviously, from the audit committee, and that we're looking for somebody that sits beneath us, that is directly responsible to the board. Do we have any disagreement with that? Okay, Dr. Savage, Dr. Bernier, do you have your direction?
We do, sir. We do, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda number 2, Hurricane Ian financial update. And we'll be joined by Dr. Desamores, Director Millay, and from the Empyrean Group, Arnold Miscali, Joseph Miscali, Kip Nelson. Welcome, and whenever you're ready, please feel free to proceed. And obviously, Superintendent, you can jump in. Sorry.
No, it's a great introduction of a fine team that's been working since prior to the hurricane, helping us. In our one-on-ones, we went through some of the information they will present. You've had an opportunity to review the documents now for greater than a week. I'm not going to steal any thunder from this group other than to thank them for their continued service. If there's, believe it or not, something I look forward to the course of my week, it's the preparation with them and then the preparation for the FEMA meeting. I will give you an update that they will also provide you, and that is that we have been blessed with the help of our federal delegation to have gotten an avenue to have FEMA on our phone calls with us. It doesn't always speed up the processes, but it does help us be in a position where we know we're talking directly to FEMA leadership and not just the individuals who represent them here locally. While they're all part of the FEMA team, there's a difference between talking to the staff here on the ground who've been extremely helpful, along with our partners at FDEM, the Florida Department of Emergency Management. But it has been very valuable, and we're very thankful to our federal delegation for helping to get FEMA to the table. I'll turn it over to Susan Millay, please.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Bernier and Attorney Kathy Dupree-Bruno. Thank you for having us today. Appreciate the background information. We're here once again to share with you the financial updates and our current status following Hurricane Ian and its impact. I'd like to have Joe Miscali, is that correct, Joe? You're doing the first slide? Present our first slide for you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, board members. Happy New Year. I know we spoke, I think October was our last update. So have, some good news to share, some hurdles that we're facing, and help to provide a little bit of a forecast of where we plan to be for the foreseeable future. So the slide that's in front of you all this afternoon is a familiar one. This is, again, our current projections of funding for the district's recovery effort. I'm going to start from the bottom and kind of work my way up. So the first layer, or first two layers really, are your insurance layers. We've talked about your NFIP, that's the National Flood Insurance Program. That's available insurance for campuses that were impacted by flood damages, which were just shy of a handful. Majority of your damages were caused by wind and wind-driven rain, which brings us into the next layer. That's your commercial insurance policy that has $75 million worth of coverage. FEMA will be a topic for today's discussion. We're very well aware at this point of what the FEMA public assistance is. That's the next layer. As we've discussed previously, FEMA is the payer of last resort. Since our last meeting, I believe we touched on this in October, FEMA's cost share, which typically is 75 cents on the dollar, has increased to 90 cents on the dollar, which helps to yield some additional funding quicker through FEMA, through the state. The next layer is your state cost share. Normally, as we discussed in our last meeting, the state will pay half of the remaining cost share. So in a 75%, 25% scenario, the state would pick up 12.5%. Since this has moved from a 90% to a 10% disaster, they would normally pick up 5%. But credit to the state of Florida, they've passed a piece of legislation, the SB4A waiver program, which allows the opportunity for that remaining 5% to be paid for by the state. So effectively making the district whole for eligible expenses that have made its way through the FEMA pipeline. The county has provided some direct reimbursement for the district's emergency response services with respect to shelters, so that's the next layer. The district also has asked upon the legislator for additional funding last year for costs that it is anticipating not to be covered by insurance and FEMA, and there was a capital appropriation of $17.5 million. which the district is working with the legislature to obtain as significant capital projects are looking to commence in the near future. And then the last layer is the out-of-pocket expense that we're currently estimating for the district. This is in relation to tax revenue losses that are not reimbursable under your insurance policy due to some policy limits. And FEMA public assistance doesn't provide relief for revenue loss. So these are just sunk costs due to the magnitude of damage to the surrounding area. And also some enhancements that the district is deciding to invest in its community with respect to the expansion of Hector Cofferata going from a K through 5 capacity school to a K through 8. So right now these continue to be kind of estimate placeholders, but kind of give you a sense as to how we are making our way through the overall recovery effort of $277 million. Again, some of it is pertaining to funding coming from insurance, FEMA, the state, and some of it is related to some decisions the district has made in the best interest of its overall mission. You will see a few green numbers here. This is tracking the changes between our last update and this meeting today. You'll see that on the next few slides as well. The district has received some additional proceeds from its NFIP program. Credit to the risk management group here, Kathy Richards and Warren Wilson, for calling upon the NFIP adjusters to provide the checks. To date, we've received 81 checks, if you can imagine that, for $5.2 million, and we've actually received some additional proceeds between the issuance of this presentation and today's meeting, which I'll go into in later slides. Next slide, please. This is the cash flow overview. I'll kind of start from top down here in terms of funds committed. We've received some significant commitments from the insurance companies, both on the commercial side and the NFIP side. Again, this increase of $0.8 million is reflected of additional proceeds that we've received from NFIP since our last meeting. We have received some additional commitments and ultimately some additional funding from FEMA due to the cost share increase going from 75% to 90%, so that yielded some additional payments. I touched on the county's contributions of $1.2 million, the legislature capital appropriation of $17.5 million, and as we talked about in October, the district was awarded, again, through another initiative of the state of Florida, through the legislature appropriations program, a $51 million award, which is effectively an advance on proceeds that should come from FEMA through the public assistance program. That was the largest award of any applicant, and we were tied with, I believe, another city or municipality in the area, but the largest effective award for any applicant on the program. In total, we're right around $137 million of committed funds. That's an increase of about $2.2 million since we last spoke. And since the issuance of this report, we've actually gotten an additional $500,000. And I'll talk about some proceeds that we're going to be targeting in the near future as well. Just working our way down the slide on funds received. We've received a significant portion of additional insurance proceeds since our last meeting. We've brought in about $10 million of actual collections. We had reported on the committed funds at our last meeting, but since then we've worked to collect those funds, and again, credit to the risk management team of Kathy Richards and Warren Wilson for making sure that the carriers are in fact paying the school district and reimbursing them. We have received additional payments, as I mentioned, from FEMA as a result of the cost share increase. So in total, we've brought in just about $11.5 million since our last meeting. An additional $500,000 has been received since the issuance of this report, bringing our total just to about $68.85 million. The final section is an important section, and I'll spend some time going through this. The district has issued about $110 million worth of purchase orders. As we've seen over the last month or so, it's kind of remained pretty steady. I believe there is still some work to be performed, in which case we'll continue to see this grow. But I think we're starting to figure out that equilibrium of where we are for costs to be encumbered, which is good. We're starting to see potentially some light at the end of the tunnel. And the district has made some significant payments between our last meeting and today of approximately $20 million to vendors that are doing the work out in the field, which is great to see. But this has unfortunately created a bit of a deficit. So since we've been reporting to the board, as we've mentioned, our goal is to keep pace with the district as best as we can from a funding perspective. And up until this point, we've been able to do that. But currently, based upon the current receipts of funds that have been paid to the district to date, there is a $5.85 million shortfall as reported on the slide. Again, we've received an additional $500,000, so it's about $5.35 million. The good news is that money is on the way. That $51 million award, the district is actively following up with the state for. The state has everything that it needs from the district. The district has executed the funding agreement. The state is just working internally with their council to figure out how to distribute the funds and dot some I's and cross some T's. And we continue to follow up weekly. So though we're currently in the red, as you can see on the slide, we're hoping that in short order we'll be back in the black with some windfall funding to help continue to finance the ongoing construction and the recovery effort for the district. So just wanted to touch on that, but let you know that additional funding is on the way, thanks to FDEM in the state of Florida. Next slide, please. Just touching on insurance, and then I'll turn it over to Kip Nelson to talk about the status of the FEMA claim. As I mentioned, we've received about $5.2 million from NFIP. Some additional proceeds have since come in. Those claims are all but finalized at this point. We're just waiting for a handful of small checks, and we'll be able to close that out and have a final number of funding provided from NFIP between now and probably our next update. I would anticipate that. On the property insurance side, we are currently at $50 million of received payments. Since the issuance of this presentation, we've received that final $400,000 payment. So that has come in. And our team has since submitted an updated claim submission identifying about $60.6 million of costs net of deductible. So those would be additional funds in excess of the $50 million that's been advanced that we would be seeking based upon costs that have been incurred to date. So our team is actively working with the insurance carrier and their representatives to quantify and document the insurance claim. We've submitted the claim schedules. We should be getting responses, and we'll work with them to address advance number 4. So we would anticipate some additional funds coming through insurance. I do want to talk about the insurance claim a little bit. As Dr. Bernier mentioned, we are working with the federal delegation on a few issues pertaining to the FEMA claim, and one of which is their interpretation of insurance and what that means for the funding that's available through FEMA public assistance. So as I mentioned, FEMA, being the payer of last resort, wants to take a reduction for what they would anticipate the district to collect for insurance proceeds. We've reviewed their calculations that they're applying to some of your large emergency work projects, one of which is a project that pertains to the remediation contractors that came in immediately after the event, remediated the buildings, pulled out wet materials, provided emergency building stabilization services to create a safe, secure environment for students to resume in-class learning. Quite a large project. It's about $20 million and change. FEMA's come back and reduced that project by $19 million based upon insurance proceeds that have been received in the form of advance payments. Our team has reviewed that calculation, and what we found is that FEMA was not taking into account the district's deductible, and we've presented a response to FEMA basically revising their analysis, which effectively would lead to about $3 million of additional funding for that project, as opposed to a $1 million net obligated amount. We're working with Dr. Bernier, the executive team here at the district, the federal delegates, FDEM very closely to try to lead FEMA to the correct conclusion. And it's been a little bit of an uphill battle, but we do have the support that we need to continue to advance the conversations. This plays into the small deficit that we talked about $5 million. At this point, we believe FEMA actually owes us, in fact, an additional $3 million. So we're continuing to work to educate FEMA as to what the implications of the insurance claim is. The district has been very clear and transparent that we will be taking reductions, but the reductions need to be calculated correctly, consistent with not just FEMA's policy, but the district's insurance policy. And effectively, what FEMA has been doing is they are reducing eligible costs for non-duplicative categories, which in this case is just the deductible. So we've memorialized our position. We've sent that to FEMA. We've escalated to the state. We've escalated to FEMA leadership. And now Dr. Bernier is working with the federal delegates to continue to apply the pressure to make sure that any reductions to the district's claim are taken appropriately and quantified accurately. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kip Nelson to provide an update on the FEMA claim.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Board. Dr. Bernier, as you might imagine, we had extensive damages after Hurricane Ian, and FEMA is very process-oriented. So we have tried to meet them on the battleground. We initially identified over 1,000 individual damage elements. That's different types of damages at different locations. That was consolidated down to around 800. And then working with FEMA and FDEM, we combined them into 192 individual projects. Those projects, again, are a combination of packages that both FEMA, FDEM, and the district staff have agreed on. They don't necessarily match projects as the construction or maintenance group might execute them, right? So that's a consolidation from an initial 305, and it's broken down into two broad categories: emergency work, which is basically picking up debris or doing temporary work to stabilize buildings. Again, the remediation work and building stabilization work that Joe referred to earlier, as well as the temporary campus or at the Hector Cafferata campus. Permanent work includes building restoration, building repair, and in some cases replacement. And in the process of developing these grants, we have gone through 94 site inspections. We have developed and documented the results of those site inspections through what they call DDD reports, damage dimensions, and then we have converted those DDDs into scopes of work. Eventually, those scopes of work will have values applied to them, and that will constitute the initial draft of our grants to be obligated and awarded by FEMA. So currently, we've received $11.44 million in emergency work. We do not have any permanent work obligated at this moment, but we are on the cusp of that. I think we should start seeing that next 30 to 45 days. We have both large and small projects, as you can see on the right-hand side. Large projects are those that are valued at over $1 million. We have both large remediation projects and debris projects, as well as permanent work projects as well. Most of the permanent work large projects are the things that remain, and that constitutes roof projects, our 17 heavily impacted campuses, and our 2 replacement projects at Hector Cafferata and Fort Myers Beach. So looking ahead to next actions by our 2 biggest funding buckets. For the insurance bucket, we will continue to finalize those few straggler NFIP claims, as well as claim submission number 4. We anticipate final settlement somewhere in the middle of this year, summer of 2024. On the FEMA side of things, we will continue to work with FEMA and FDEM leadership through the claims management process. We'll finalize emergency work in the near future. That's the work that was done right after the event, so we kind of work in time sequence. And then we will work on our large value projects like Hector Cafarata and Fort Myers Beach to make sure that those are funded for replacement. And then finally, we're working through with the federal delegation for any kind of roadblocks, particularly the insurance issue that Joe mentioned earlier. And then we have additional funding opportunities primarily through the state, the LAT program, as well as 404, what's called the Hazard Mitigation Program, with Florida Division of Emergency Management. So we will also work with the county on their HUD funding program, CDBG-DR. It's a long acronym, but it's basically HUD-related disaster funding to support new initiatives as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Bernier.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we're interested in your continued comments and discussion, and we stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Comments, questions, feedback? Ms. Patrica.
Thank you very much for thoroughly confusing me. I think that's, I say that as a compliment because obviously you know what you're doing and I have no idea what I'm doing. If we could go to slide 4. I'm not clear, you worked from the bottom up, which helped, but as you worked from the bottom up, I got the sense that FEMA was at 75%, now they're at 90%, which leaves the state covering just 5%, but then they've passed legislation that brings in another 5%. To me, that adds up to 100%, and then the top is out of pocket 48.4 million. So how are we at 100% coverage, but still out of pocket 48.4 million? And I have another question associated with that 48.4 million, which is tax revenue losses. I didn't think we experienced nearly as much as we were anticipating, number one. Number two, why is the expansion of Hector Cafarata considered an out-of-pocket hurricane expense instead of a capital 10-year capital plan expense? That's my first round of questions.
Currently, the information is in, so I'll take some of it and I'll turn it over. Hector Cafarata replacement is in the 10-year capital plan because that's where we've placed it, expecting FEMA to be able to reimburse. Remember, FEMA, unlike homeowners that can upgrade appliances and other things and do those, FEMA with public institutions, you're required to put back in place the same thing you had. So we couldn't upgrade our tile, we couldn't upgrade our furniture, fixtures, and equipment in a Lexington flood, for instance. So because Hector was a K-5, to expand it to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which is aligned with our capital plan and expected growth in the Cape, FEMA only sees their responsibility as replacing the elementary school. Right. The additional area would be something we would have to cost. When FEMA actually pays off, that money could be utilized then to supplant and put into the capital plan, so that cost becomes more cost neutral to us to replace Hector Cafarata. As to the 48.4 million in the tax revenue losses, I'll defer to the team. They can explain that in a better way. And if that answer on Hector isn't enough, we will follow up with any additional questions you may have about that.
So I'll start with just the funding kind of metrics that you talked about, the 75%. So FEMA will be paying 90% of what they determine to be eligible, and the state, with help of this SB4 Waiver Act, will provide the remaining 10%. So that's, again, predicated on FEMA agreeing that the expenses are eligible, right? With respect to the tax revenue losses, you are correct. The revenue loss was less than what was expected, but there was a loss based upon what we were quantifying towards the end of last year. Our team has not looked at it recently just because, again, it's not an eligible expense. We've put forward a claim under the insurance policy for your policy limit of $1 million for lost revenue associated with kind of contingent losses, which is to the surrounding area. But since we've maxed that out, we've kind of stopped reviewing that. So a portion of this is based upon what we were calculating at the end of last year, which may have been reduced further, which we can evaluate between now and the next board update. And then as Dr. Bernier mentioned, he's correct that FEMA will only pay for your pre-disaster design function and capacity plus applicable codes and standards. So right now we're in the process of working with FEMA to, one, agree that it's a replacement, which our understanding is they're very close to accepting our position, which we communicated to them in October of 2022. And then the next step will be to work with them to agree on a funding amount, which will be used to quantify based upon what FEMA would determine to be eligible, which will be then used to apply against the actual costs that you will be incurring on the actual project, as Dr. Bernier mentioned. So right now we are showing this because the overall impacts are just shy of the $300 million. And some of that includes, again, mission-oriented investments by the district, but it is a result of Hurricane Ian. So that's what we're showing here. But we need to keep in mind that not all mission-oriented efforts are, in fact, eligible for FEMA. So therein lies the disconnect. So hopefully that helps to clarify, but happy to elaborate further if needed.
Yeah, the eligible piece just made all the sense in the world. I get that now. What I still, I guess, don't understand, and maybe we just need more time on this in a one-on-one or something, is the difference between the cost of replacing the elementary and making it into a K-8. Is that difference in cost included in that $48.4 million?
Correct. That's what we're estimating, yeah.
It is included, and to me, that doesn't make sense, because to me, it's a separate expense. We lost the school to the hurricane, and we decided to expand the school, which is separate and apart from a hurricane loss. So from a transparency perspective and from my understanding of a budget perspective, they should be separated costs and not included as a hurricane loss. No?
The loss of the hurricane, loss of Hector Caffaretta Elementary School is the loss. What's reflected in the $48.4 million is the cost differential from just replacing Hector and the additional dollars that we would have to expend from somewhere in order to build a K-8. Does that make sense? So that's why it's included in the 48.4. We want to be transparent with you and the public that building a K-8 for Hector Caffaretta over in the Cape, we will get a lot of money to rebuild that school building, but we won't get all of it. So they wanted to make sure that it was out-of-pocket expenses, that addition of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at Hector will cost us additional dollars, where we'll pay for it out of the capital money for the capital plan that was approved. But we want to note that here so that somebody does not say you're getting a K-8 when you only lost an elementary school. And if I may, I want to follow up with one thing for the public. There's been a lot of conversation recently about when the former Hector Caffaretta is going to come down, and I know it is the eyesore in Cape Coral at the moment. But to Kip's point and to Joe's point, if we were to take it down prior to FEMA giving us full approval, and they said at that point, we'd like to look at the electrical system again before providing approval, we wouldn't have an electrical system for them to look at. Not much to look at in the electrical system anyway, and it's been clearly documented through a lot of the other documentation that Joe talked about. You know, we've taken pictures, we've had drone footage, we have everything that FEMA needs to make the decision. But if we take it down without their final approval to pay for it, we run the risk of them saying, we'd like to come back and look at one more thing. So I just want the citizens of Cape Coral to know that's why Hector still continues to stand. And when you see the fire department and the police department in there working, it's because they're using it as a training facility. And doing no additional damage, by the way.
This one I think is quick.
If it's quick, then
It
I got to
is.
come back to you.
Slide 5, and you may not know this, you may have to provide this in an update. What were the actual sheltering costs? And it appears as if the 1.2 million has not yet been received. Is that true?
We have the sheltering costs, and those were the costs that we submitted to the county in total, and we received the $1.2 million.
Excellent. That's it for now. Thank you.
Comments, questions? Anybody else? Okay. Did you have anything else, Ms. Patrica?
Slide 6. 60.66 million. Where did I come up with that amount? I don't know where I came up with that amount, but,
It's the bottom, in the blue.
okay, there you go. So we're not getting the full 75 million from insurance? Yes, no?
We're working towards that,
Okay.
but this is based upon, it's similar to FEMA, it's a reimbursement essential program, so it's
Okay.
based upon incurred costs. So
Okay.
this claim submission includes all of the incurred costs to date,
Okay.
factoring the district's deductible, which
Great.
is a percentage of each building. So this is net of that. So this would be the undisputed amount we would be looking for the carriers to pay through claim submission number 3, which would be their 4th installment of an advance.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, that's all we have. Thank you so much for your hard work for this district. We appreciate it, so.
Thank you.
Now we're going to be moving on to item 3 with Dr. Bernier, which will be our agenda review for the February 6th action meeting.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at this time, I don't have any questions, so I don't have any questions prepared or responses prepared, but open to any questions that the board members may have at this time.
Anyone, questions, comments? Ms. Giovanelli?
Only the question I might have is regarding the pulled item. There was a pulled item, and I was just curious about that pulled item. And maybe it could be a conversation that will eliminate it when it does come back up.
Can you be more specific?
Yes, hold on, let me get,
G1.
thank you.
And there was a comment about it in here.
Oh, it just took me out. I gotta go back in too. Got kicked out.
Which one is upside down?
G1.
The item that was pulled has to do with thought exchange. As you know, with our strategic plan, we are heavily dependent upon survey information to provide some of the continued technical and necessary data to respond specifically to some of the scorecards. In the past, we've used things like SurveyMonkey, which staff is then responsible for developing questions. In reviewing staff's questions, sometimes you will get a question like, do you feel both safe and secure at school? From great survey work that you're trained to do, which we do not have an individual on staff who has the time to do this. You should never ask a multiple question in a survey. When somebody responds to being safe and secure, you don't know whether they're responding to their overall safety or whether they're responding about secure. This particular organization was vetted through chiefs and through our procurement process with another company famous for doing lots of different surveys during this period of time. That would be Gallup. This one, because of cost and because of its information related to their ability to help us through not only the development of our surveys, but the ongoing delivery of the information, the quantifying of it, the providing us with the data, I think provides us the opportunity for our community to know that while we're surveying, that survey development and those quantification of the results is being done by an independent third party that then is being provided to us so they can update areas of our strategic plan. This was an expansion to a full year contract because we want it to move not only through this year but into next, because our strategic plans don't change, our strategic plan goals do not change. And it's important that we have consistent survey data so that we get the same questions answered each time. So longitudinally, we can see whether we're making improvements or not. Sorry, that was a very long answer to,
No,
it's a survey company.
I appreciate it, thank you, because, I mean, it'll eliminate it, and when it comes up, you'll answer my question. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions in regards to tonight's action meeting agenda? Okay. I have none myself. So at this point, we're moving on to good of the order, and we will start with you, Ms. Morgan.
Okay, I'm going to ask the board to, if they will direct the chair to bring a couple of items back for workshops. So first, and I'm just going to read these. Recently, after hearing the board chair introduce himself at a political event as the board chair of a conservative board, I asked him for justification of that characterization. In my opinion, the comment inappropriately characterized the board. Apart from the three most recently elected who were endorsed and promoted as conservative Republican candidates, 4 other board members were elected nonpartisan. It is the expectation of the community that board members act in the best interests of students and not in a manner consistent with a political ideology, liberal or conservative. I cannot recall a decision made by this board that represented either a liberal or conservative point of view. To label this body without the prior knowledge and consent of the whole misrepresents our work. After my conversation with the board chair, and within 24 hours, the board chair again introduced himself as the school board chair of a conservative board. So I'm asking the board to direct the board chair to schedule 30 minutes of a future board workshop to discuss this matter. So that's number 1, and I'm asking the board on that. Should I wait before I do the next one?
Pleasure of the board. What does the board ask for?
I would have to agree with Ms. Morgan as well, because I believe that we need to be, especially when we're creating policies, that we are viewing everything as neutral. We need to make sure that we are doing the same.
Real quick clarification to the record. Anytime I'm speaking out, I do indicate that is my own personal thoughts and my own First Amendment rights. I'm not representing the school district. I just want to make sure that is continually always on the record. So, but whatever the board pleases, I'm happy to go forward.
And in response, I will say you represent the board in a particular, you characterize the board as something that we have not agreed to be characterized other than a school board. I mean, I would say the same thing if somebody said we were a liberal board.
Does the board wish to move forward with this?
I think we need to have a discussion, and now's not the time now is not the time for a discussion. But the whole thought of not allowing people to say what they think or what they feel or what their opinion is just not something I support, but apparently we need to have a discussion to discuss that.
I think it's best brought up at master board training, our next one.
Okay.
I think that would be the route to go.
Good suggestion. Makes sense.
Are we in agreement with that? Okay.
Mr. Chair. Would the board provide me the direction to call our master board trainer and provide her with this information so that she can be prepared for the conversation? Or would you prefer? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Comment, another request. At a recent one-on-one with the board attorney, I learned that the legal services team is challenged with respect to its budget. They didn't get what they wanted in the initial, in creating the budget, and they are now contracting for legal services in excess of their budget. So I'm asking the board chair, or asking the board to direct the board chair to schedule 30 minutes of a future board workshop to discuss board oversight of the legal services budget process. And when I spoke to the board attorney about this, I said, one, we should be looking at comparable legal services costs in-house and out-of-house across the state. With respect to what we have now, which is carte blanche outside services procurement, we should really be thinking about, and again, I discussed this with her, should we be negotiating contracts with lawyers on the outside so that we have a way of managing our costs more effectively with respect to the legal services budget? So I throw that out to the board also for a discussion at a future time.
Board?
I'm okay with having a conversation.
Have a conversation?
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I have no problem going over costs. I mean, I know we've had a lot of need for outside. I'm not throwing any blame on the attorney, so those kind of things happen. You never know how many lawsuits you're going to have. So it's, can't ever be written in stone, and, you know, because the cost of not defending yourself can be much higher than the cost of defending yourself.
I agree. Then there should be exceptional situations, but not on an ongoing basis where you're trying to budget for the year and what you're asking for isn't being allocated, and you believe you have justification, but we haven't seen the justification, so we can't provide direction to do what's been asked, or not provide direction. So that's, all right, that's basically what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Anything
that-
else, Ms.
No,
Morgan?
well, I have one other thing, but if you want to, the board has agreed to discuss this?
Yeah, I've gotten no
Okay.
opposition, so it looks like we move forward, so.
And I just want to point out that I was looking at the budget for the state. Looks like there are differences in the House and Senate between the House and the Senate on the Cape Coral Technical College and the expansion of the Fort Myers Technical College to the tune of, I think it's close to $2 million. Where's my second budget page? Fort Myers, the Cape Technical College for the Senate is $2.1 million, and for the House is $1,050,000, and for, messed up my pages. Oh, and for the technical college, this is significant, the Senate's budgeting or talking about appropriating $4 million, and the House is talking about $1,250,000. So I assume that's one of the reasons that Mr. Gomez is talking about going up to meet with members of the delegation and members of the legislature. That's my comment. Those are my comments.
Just
Thank you.
For clarification, you're talking about the annex that we're.
Yes.
Okay, because not Fort Myers Technical College.
I'm sorry, I thought I said initially the expansion of Fort Myers Technical College, yes.
Okay.
That's the annex. That's what
Okay,
it,
it's the
yeah.
annex, thank you. If it's in regards to this topic, Mr.
Yes,
Persons, yes, go ahead.
I just want to clarify for the public, it's not an actual building expansion, it's a planning expansion.
I know, but the
Okay,
point is
I
there's
mean-
a significant difference in the
Yes.
allocations at this point.
I understand.
Yes, okay.
It's just a little confusing, like, because
it's
Cape
not a
Coral
building.
is an
Is an
goes
addition.
along with our expansion, it's just
Right.
a shortcoming of I think we had 12 million set aside, more or less, and they're adding to that so we can
Yep.
do more expansion. That's all, just for the public.
Thank you.
Agree, thanks, Ms. Moore. I just wanted to make sure we're clarified, just for the public on that. Thank you. Ms. Langford Fleming?
I have none.
Mr. Persons?
Debbie and I got to go to a great talent show. And it was really good seeing all the different children do all the different things from elementary all the way up to high school. We got to judge. That was good. No one threw eggs at us or anything, so it must have done okay, along with the other judges. So it was really great performances. It was a lot of fun. That was all.
Ms. Jordan?
We did a great job. Yes, we did. And I don't have all my stuff with me, so I'll just wait and do it later really quick. But we did a great job.
That it, Ms. Jordan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I
Ms.
have nothing for
Patrica?
good of the order. I will give my report at the briefing.
Okay. Ms. Juvenelli?
Same. So we can keep moving. Thank you.
The only thing I wanted to bring up is many of us were able to go out to the East Zone, the bus depot for the opening of the new facilities over there, and that was fantastic, and really enjoyed seeing the smiles on all the faces of our transportation dispatchers and bus drivers over there. So it was a good time over there. I'm looking forward to it. And besides that, Ms. Morgan, as always, I appreciate you bringing up anything, and as I said, I just do want to let everyone know, I said, whenever I do, and I would hope the true is the same for everyone else up here, whenever I do speak in any private setting, I do use the legal disclaimer. So, as I said, any decision I make up here is always based not on politics, but what's in the best interest of the district. So, but I'm always happy to have a chat about that, and I appreciate that. So, do we have anything with Dr. Bernier?
I just have a question of clarification to Board Member Morgan, if I may. The workshop related to the oversight for legal services, do you see that as a combined presentation between the legal department regarding its expenses and outlining those, as well as the budgetary process with Dr. Desamore? Or is it very specific to the process? Do we want to look at process for how legal can update their budget?
It's the latter.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Yes, sir. Attorney Dupree Bruno.
I have none, thank you.
Okay, meeting 1 of 3 down. So we'll have a board briefing today at 2:30, followed by a board action meeting at 6 o'clock tonight. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned and the time is 1:31. Thank you, everyone.
Great job.